Welcome back to Synergy to Synastry with Christine and Renee. On today's episode, we're going to talk about intuition versus anxiety. We're also going to talk about community, relationships, and stigmas associated with being a little bit more public about your newfound intuitive skills. How does a supportive community help this transition? Whether or not leveraging your intuition can make you anxious, and how listeners can differentiate between anxiety and their inner voice. But first, Renee owes us an explanation about her follow up with our spirit council from the last episode. So, Renee, I'll turn it over to you.
I did my second spirit council meditation, and it was noticeably different from the first one. There was a much more serious tone to it. So what happened was I went into the astral garden. I was not a foot in there, and I got greeted immediately, and it kind of freaked me out. Reginald again and the angel, and they walked me all the way through the woods to get to the table. The table this time was a dark wood, more like you'd see in a boardroom, versus the white I had just a week and change ago. There was this glowing golden cube floating in the middle of the table, floated towards me and went into my chest. And I was instructed to take 3 deep breaths to do the download and get the information. I wrote down this quote here: be patient on the alignment journey. You're recalibrating every day, which is why there's an unease and confusion or cloudiness at times. You have all the power you need. I'm feeling a sense of connection. I raised the career topic because that's what I started to bring up last time. So that was what I wanted to follow up on. And they immediately started giving me lists of options. I had a reading with some of our psychic friends, Lisa and Ocean, on Monday, and that was all about my career. And what I keep getting told through my own intuition and then from them is to pursue more out of the box thinking and types of roles that use my skill set in a different way. So, what kept coming up in this download was travel planner, trip planner, event planner, resort planner. I also started getting information about an actual company to work for. It's a female CEO or founder. There's a humble energy. The team is a group of 3 to 4 people. The branding has pastel colors in it, and that I would find them through somebody who likes a post about our podcast. They work at the company or they know somebody who works there. And I was instructed to return 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, and 8 weeks from now for touch bases.
I mean, this is really the spirit council at work, and they're setting you up as if they were your business team on Earth.
Yes.
Very, very cool. Thank you, Renee, for updating us. I know I hate it to be continued. Let's move on now to the rest of the episode. We're going to start off with the stigmas that there are out there around being intuitive or being psychic. I know for me, I grew up in a religious community. Everybody was Roman Catholic. And there was this stigma around anything that involved psychics was the devil. I remember I went to my first psychic in high school, and the question I had for the psychic was, am I going to go to hell by doing this? And he was like, no. Now, when people ask me that question, I'm like, oh, absolutely not. I set boundaries, I set intentions. And that's probably what this guy was explaining to me at the time. It's actually a very benevolent thing. And also, if you really think about it, who gave me this gift? If God created me, then it must be God, right? He must have given it to me for a reason. And I think another stigma that we have is that of scammers. There's really an idea that someone is going to scam you or take advantage of you. And to be fair, like I've heard of situations where this has happened. And when it's happened because the person looking for information is so low or so desperate for something that they allow someone else to dictate their life or what they're looking for. My advice to listeners is if you are looking for a psychic or an intuitive, think about why you're going there, right? If you feel like you are susceptible to just receiving any information anybody tells you without critically thinking whether or not it's beneficial for you, I would maybe start with a therapist and then, move on to a psychic or an intuitive when you feel a little more secure in what your boundaries are and who you are as a person.
Those are all really awesome examples Other stigmas could include that people aren't living in reality, that they're making it up, this is all in their head. They're potentially even a recluse, like they're so detached that if you're psychic and intuitive, you're off in a corner somewhere and you have a witch's brew. You hear psychic, then you hear crystal ball, then you hear witches, and then you get to the pentagram, which you see in paganism, and people think that you're communicating with the devil, or you're so detached from reality because you've almost created this magical world. I think there's kind of a similar stigma for people that go to Renaissance fairs or doing cosplay, that you are taking on another identity or you're in this other group and it feels really separate from everyone else and almost all consuming. In broader terms, to put a button on it, people could think you're weird or it's too woo woo, it's too out there. They're almost suspicious of it and not really trusting what that means and what that says about you. Like, it's a reflection on your character. Next thing that we wanted to talk about, how has it been going for us with trying to embrace the identity and public persona of being psychic intuitives, and ultimately what resistance we have to that?
Growing up, I always knew I had something, right? And I would sort of like test it out. I would tell a close friend or someone I was dating about my dreams, and they would immediately like shoot me down. And I just kind of internalized that. And then when I did the Nirvana Be Light program and I was really surrounded by community and I was starting to give readings and I had the proof that I was definitely intuitive, and I now have to share with all these people who I'm 97% sure are not going to be supportive of it, who I am. It's like coming out of the psychic closet. Some of the resistance I had were mostly fears, right? I've been out of the finance world for about a year now, but there's a part of me that is thinking about going back in, maybe getting a job, later in the year once my business is set up and running on its own. And I was just talking today about having two separate resumes set up, one that has my business on it and one that doesn't, because I don't know how people in that world will take my newfound career or like my interim career. The funny thing is, I have read people from my finance community and I have told a couple of people, and everyone's been supportive. So I'm not entirely sure exactly what I'm scared of still.
My early exposure to intuitives was TV. We watched Lisa Williams, we watched Teresa Caputo, we watched Tyler Henry. We loved all of those shows, and I never watched them and thought, I wonder if I'm psychic. I had a fascination with it. The fact that we could watch TV shows over the course of many years with multiple different psychic mediums, that shows there's a level of acceptance. It means there's people watching it, but even that, it's a little bit hard to overcome the regular stigmas in place. And you kind of get in your head, what if I'm not the hero? What if I'm the bad guy? If I tap into this space, if I open myself up to it, what if I do become those negative things? What if I am that stigma? What if it leads me down this twisted path? There's ways that you can talk yourself out of it. Fast forward to the last few years since we started the Nirvana Be Light program, I'm telling people information that actually makes sense, and I can't believe this is happening. I was in awe of it. I don't think that I would have been able to get to the point I am now of doing readings for people, creating my own Instagram account and posting about it regularly and sharing it on my main page, having this podcast, holding open conversations with family and friends, and being significantly more comfortable talking to people about it. Not 100% of the time, but way more than even just a year ago. If it hadn't been for psychic group, that I think has really been the most important piece, because otherwise you do feel like you're by yourself. We're all looking at each other like, I had this really weird thing happen, but it's a safe space because we could talk to each other about it and all be skeptical and all even discuss stigma. oh, I'm worried about telling this friend or talking to this family member about it, or coworkers. We could ask each other for advice, and we were all kind of following and leading each other through that process.
I'm glad you brought up our little community, our Witchy Wednesday community. Can you talk more about that?
We started meeting monthly, and really through that whole process, it really became that secure platform for all of us to be honest about what our experiences were, what we were testing out, what was working, what wasn't working, ask questions. And we could do that with each other, even if we didn't feel like we could talk to our family about it. No matter how close you are, it was a big learning experience for all of us. We all grew up in the same society. We have these preconceived notions about what it's like being hesitant about who you should trust and listen to, and does this stuff even work? So, through the Witchy Wednesdays, which continue to this day, through going to workshops over the last year, those allow me to learn about different perspectives and modalities. There are so many different psychics, just as there are many teachers. You can have 10 history teachers in the course of your K through 12, but they're all going to be different from each other because they have different perspectives, not just personalities, but perspectives, teaching styles. And the same thing happens with any of the metaphysical topics we discuss in this podcast and with intuition in general. That has been very informative for me to get out there, interact with some different people. I have been trying to pivot a little bit more towards actively engaging with people through social media, so commenting or tagging or trying to message other people in the industry. And these last two tactics are really just the beginning phases of building this practice. I know that it's important to keep meeting different people, and some of that's for networking, but also keeping your mind open. It's different perspectives, people with different backgrounds, different skill sets. What if I meet somebody and they have clairvoyance and I could learn from them how the heck it even works? And that would be great.
When I'm in this community, I feel like I'm at home. I don't have to pretend to be someone else to feel comfortable. I could speak in a way that makes sense to me. I can allow my mind to go to these like weird places. I remember asking Deganit, like, where do new souls come from? Do they exist? And she's like, oh, it's a really good question. I never thought about that. And I can allow my brain to ask these questions without being shot down. It allows me to get used to talking in this new way so that when I am out and I'm speaking with other people, it gets me used to talking and not immediately having a panic attack.
Mm.
And I'm like, no, I should be saying this. This is who I am. And if that person has an adverse reaction, I have a community that I could fall back on and say, oh my God, you'll never believe what I did. And we can giggle about it, as opposed to me feeling like I've done something wrong. And like you said, Renee, too, joining different workshops has been awesome. Our psychic friend group, we all came from the same program. We all have the same sort of base as to how we got here. And learning how other people started or like their base and where they came up from. I mean, some of their ideas can be more out there than mine. It opens up a new perspective and that there's not only one way to exist in this world.
Have you found, because I have, that sometimes I am meeting new people or observing new people and I go, oh, that feels too woo for me. All right, well, am I not being open minded enough? Or are they really off the deep end? Am I only thinking that because I have this ingrained stigma?
100%. I almost feel like I'm a couple levels removed from the people I grew up with in terms of my spiritual knowledge. Then I meet some other people and they are like 50 levels removed from where I am. And I do have the same reaction as you, but I think that's what makes us good at what we do because we still use our critical thinking skills. Something smells a little off here. I'm going to stay away from that. And yes, I do check myself. Am I judgy or is this really something that just doesn't feel right? Anxiety versus intuition. Can using your intuition make you anxious? And Renee, I'm curious to hear what you have to say on this first.
Something that could happen if you are leveraging your intuition in excess is you might develop a fixation on wanting to know what's going to happen, especially if we're talking about looking into the future or trying to make the right decision, that you could be clinging so tightly to control, which, as we've learned, does not work with your intuition, is not supported by your guides giving you messages, that you could get yourself in a tizzy with that. When you're fixating on the future, that is a classic hallmark of anxiety. With any meditation practice, you're trying to be in the present. When you're tapping into your intuition, you're going to connect if you're in the present. Your body is calm. Your mind isn't wandering to the best of your ability. All things in moderation. If you are constantly leveraging divination tools, meeting with your guides and asking a billion questions versus living your life, only tapping in periodically as a healing tool, it's supposed to be benefiting your health. It's supposed to be grounding you. It's supposed to be giving you perspective. So, the short answer to the question is yes, leveraging your intuition can make you anxious if you take it too far.
It's not the leveraging of the intuition that makes me anxious. It's the fear that someone's going to hold it against me because I
Mm,
can't show my work, or that I'm not going to like the decision, or I won't be taken seriously because I made my decision this way. I think it comes back to the control. Renee and I had a conversation. For some reason, I feel like you should go first on this one. And now I understand why, because it's the nuance of how Renee answered the question versus how I was going to answer the question. Listening to that intuition didn't make me nervous because I know Renee knows what I'm talking about when I say, I'm getting a hit. I think you should go first. And we just
mhm,
go with it. If I was in a different situation where I wasn't with, someone from my community or someone who knows me, and I had to say, I'm just getting a feeling that you should go first, and they were very against it and I couldn't prove my work, I would start to get
mm.
anxious.
Yeah, I thought that you were going to talk about performance anxiety. So if you were giving a reading to
Oh.
someone that you feel anxious that you're not going to get it right, which is another angle, but I do think your point makes sense.
Oh, that's so funny. I love how we think of things differently. But now that we've touched on anxiety, the biggest thing to learn is how listeners can differentiate between anxiety and their intuition. I always say intuition whispers, anxiety shouts. When I notice my intuition and I notice the whisper and I can start to hear the whisper a little more clearly, I'll say to it, you're so wise. You're like a miniature Buddha. I do also experience anxiety. When it happens for me, my mind tends to go into a loop. Are my thoughts trying to protect me, or are they calmly just telling me what is? The way I would recommend if you're trying to hear your intuition more is to take out that journal that Renee and I keep talking about and to write out what you're hearing and then label it. Do I think this is an intuition or do I think this is an anxiety? And then see what happens. And I think the more data you have for yourself, the more proof you have right there in black and white about what you're feeling. And then you can start to lean into it and you won't always need your journal and you won't always need proof. But I think it's a good way to start. Renee, I'm curious what you think.
Your anxiety is also fear based, where your intuition will elicit a sense of calm. You have a fear that something's going to happen or something's not going to happen. And that's the spiral that you were talking about versus an intuition. You don't have any unease in your body. You feel a certainty and you feel calm. So that's a physiological way that you can identify it. You could also reframe it that anxiety is conditioning and intuition is instinct. So if we're all born with an intuition, it's actually your instinctive response. It's the insight that you get when you see something, when you hear something, when you feel something. It's visceral. Anxiety is stemming from social constructs, these things that you've learned, these habits, behaviors, mental frameworks that have been conditioned into you. It's almost like a nature versus nurture. And I know that we have both, which is why you can be someone who has anxiety and also is intuitive. You can quote unquote hear your anxiety in your head because it's your mind. It's what we've talked about in the dream episode when we were discussing that narrating mind from Dr. Michael Lennox. Because it is so active, it impacts your ability to actually tune in to the intuitive guidance that you're receiving. We can't control our minds. Yes, you can rein them in a little bit more, rein your thoughts in by developing a meditation practice and using other mindfulness tools, getting a good night's sleep. The list goes on. Understandably, if you are someone who is very, very anxious or is in a state of stress, maybe you aren't diagnosed with any sort of anxiety disorder, but you have chronic stress. It can be a big ask to sit here and say, hey, trust your gut, trust your intuition. It's not a big deal. Like, it is hard if you're not in the right state of mind, if the conditions aren't as such in your life. And as we've spoken about throughout this podcast, we have both overthought things, over rationalized, dismissed our intuition, and had difficulty identifying when we were getting messages. And part of that is because we can be stressed, we can be anxious. Even for us, several years out, we're not perfect at this. We miss this all the time. We don't always get it right. We're not coming to you as experts, we're coming as fellow learners. We're maybe just a couple grades ahead of you.
I like that analogy. And to the listeners out there, if you have questions or you're getting started thinking about what is intuition, what is anxiety, and you have questions, but you don't know who to turn to, you don't have your community yet, Renee and I are happy to be your community. Please send us an email. You also have our Instagram handles. All of this is linked in the show notes. Moving on to what we've learned this week, I have been holding this in actually since we recorded our last episode. I like immediately learned this and had to put it to the side and wait. I was listening to the podcast Endless Thread. It's basically a podcast with two hosts who comb Reddit for some of the wildest stories and dig deeper journalism style into the story and report on it. So, this latest episode was about something called Irukandji syndrome. It's the sting from a venomous jellyfish, and it leads to feelings of impending doom for like 4 to 30 hours. Irukandji are a type of venomous jellyfish, a box jellyfish out in Australia. They were describing the sting itself almost as like a mosquito bite. And the cool things that I learned about this is that there's a difference between something being poisonous and venomous. So if something is venomous, it has to sting you in order to hurt you. But if something is poisonous, it has to be ingested in order to hurt you.
But then
So,
that doesn't make sense. You don't ingest poison ivy, you just touch it.
do you ingest it through your skin?
No, that's not ingestion. That would be contact. That'd be exposure. It's not stinging. Then I feel like poison ivy is incorrectly named.
No, you're right. And it says here on Google poison ivy is poisonous because it contains an oil that can cause an itchy rash when it touches your skin. But why is poison ivy not venomous? All right, well, they said it on the podcast.
You should message them and say, explain poison ivy. We found a loophole.
Yeah, I found a loophole.
This past week, I learned about the history of the Boston Post Road. For anybody from Massachusetts, you know this is a route that goes through the state. A mail delivery route between Boston and New York City in the 1600s. It was broken out into 3 roads, so there's an upper, middle, and lower route. And that's changed over time, but it was a main delivery route between our 2 cities. Isn't that so funny?
Wait, I'm Googling it now. It looks like it literally starts at Wall Street. Yeah, Wall Street, Harlem, Albany. Oh my God. And then it goes up.
Yep. So in Massachusetts, for anyone that lives here, I saw that apparently 34 of the original markers still exist. So if you want to go on a little scavenger hunt and find the original markers from the 1600s, you can.
This is amazing. I love this fun fact. Thank you. Oh, there's a map. Okay, Renee, how funny would it be if you and I started at two different ends of Boston
And we just walked towards each other.
until we found each other?
That would take a really long time. This is a
Way too
long
long.
road.
Wow, this literally starts at the tip of Manhattan. Let's move on to our channeled messages. As I started channeling, it was snowing in my psychic space. The snow is actually an image from a movie that I watch around Christmas. It's called The Bishop's Wife. It's an old movie from the 40s. But the premise of it is that there's this husband and wife. The husband is a pastor and they're losing like the spark in their marriage. An angel gets sent down in human form. There's a scene where the angel is with the bishop's wife and her daughter at a frozen lake, and the daughter wants to play with all these kids, but they don't think she can play with them. He ends up assisting her with a little bit of his magics. She goes out and plays and has a wonderful day. The wife has a great day. And I'm like, okay, this is a lovely scene and I love this movie, but what is the point of all this imagery? And the point that I was getting is that it feels like there are, you can call them angels, your spirit guides, working to move things around in your favor. And it's right under your nose and you don't even notice it. The advice I'm hearing is if the opportunity presents itself to indulge in a little whimsy, to go for it. And the mantra that I got was that productivity can also mean having fun.
In my reading for this week, I saw the image of a book flipping rapidly through the pages, and then a hand comes in with just a finger and it stops the book on a single page. So I lean over, looking to see what's on the page that was selected, and it's an old Victorian house. And then I'm getting pulled into the scene, and it's a wealthy male landowner. I got the insight that he was, quote, intrinsically guided towards wealth and prosperity despite hardships. You can have a life that's, quote, worth being proud of in the sense that you feel inspired and, most importantly, that you're generous to share your wisdom and the riches that you have. These riches don't just have to be monetary. I got an instruction for the listener to, quote, be the light for others, to call them home. Coming home is referring to connecting and finding their value, their worth, and their inner riches. I will be there for you, which just made me think of the Friends theme song. I'll be there for you.
I thought it the same. Thanks for listening.
If you'd like to learn more, the resources we used to prepare for this episode are listed in the show notes.
You can reach me, Christine, at Channeled by Christine with one L on Instagram.
And you can reach me, Renee, at _read by Renee, or connect with both of us via email at synergy2synastry@gmail.com.
Keep your spirit curious and your aura sparkling.
We'll see you when the stars next align.
Hi, listeners. If while listening to the series, you found that you have some psychic abilities that you want to hone through the same program that Renee and I have been a part of, send an email to us at synergy2synastry@gmail.com, letting us know you're interested, and we'll hook you up with Daganit, the founder of the Be Light program, and we'll also provide a $500 discount on tuition fees.
Sorry, I'm reacting to her because the second you said what the episode is about, she goes like this. And I said, is that what your question? I said, is that what your question was going to be? And she hasn't responded. She's like, I'm still going to ask my question anyway.
First off, it just proves how psychic I am.
See?
The fact that you were going to be in the room when we were talking about it, yeah, exactly. You're getting a sneak preview into this topic. This isn't going to come out for several months.
And the fact that I knew it was going to be discussed because I was going to bring it up.
I know.
Is your mom Italian?
No.
Oh.
I'm against it. I'm
No.
married to Italians.
Yeah.
My kids are
Stepdad's Italian too.
I have this theory, but you've just disproven it, that the psychic gift drops down the Italian line, but that's
But I am
obviously not
Greek.
true.
She's Greek though.
Oh, that's the same thing. If you told me you were Irish, I'd be like, oh, maybe it's not the same thing. But
Well, she is Irish too.
Yeah. Greek and Irish. That's what I'm mostly Greek and Irish.
If only this was in a different episode, we could maybe use this as the outro, because otherwise...
Why did you just invite me to this episode? Forget about the other one. We want to have Maureen back, Renee's mom, because she's so enlightening.
Yes, 100%.
On the podcast we do tomorrow or whatever, I'll be like,
I don't even know what you're talking about because I was so distracted by her, but you were trying to get my attention, so I was like, you must have said something or asked me something.
No, you started laughing, and then I was like, did I say something? Or, okay,
No,
I'm going to cover your face so I can get this out.
Okay, I'm going to mute again. You can start over.
Here we go.
Oh, jeez. She's back.
Don't walk around with your glasses.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Not when they're reading glasses.
And also, one thing I learned this week, I'll save it for tomorrow.
Oh, gee. We're not going to do that segment.
Oh,
and it's not tomorrow, it's Sunday.
It's Sunday. What I'll tell you is, if you're going to go for a walk and you wear like little pads, make sure they go up enough so that you don't have blisters. Because you know, sometimes you wear them and then they fall
down.
This happened to me today. I just changed my socks and I feel like a new person. All right, toodles, bye.
Okay, bye.